Hi, my name's Samuel, and today I'm going to be interviewing my mom.
Hi,
So my first question is if you could say your name and date of birth.
my name is Elizabeth Ortiz, and I was born September 5th, 1961, but my maiden name is Rivera.
Okay. So I wanted to ask my first question, or second question now. Where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx in New York City.
Okay. I wanted to know interesting or crazy story of your date, like of your birth, like maybe something that happened at the hospital or like on the way there.
Actually, I have no crazy stories about my birth because my mom doesn't really remember it. So I don't, I just happened to get a photo from my honey and on that picture, it does have a time and date, the time I was born, but I believe I was born in the evening. But that's all I know about my birth. I was born in a hospital called Lebanon, which is no longer there.
Okay. Did they tear that down?
Yeah, they tore most of the hospitals that me or my siblings were born at were torn down, and now they have like newer hospitals.
Okay. So I wanted to know if you could describe your childhood and your childhood home.
Well, my childhood was kind of crazy. We did a lot of moving around. So we went to a lot of different schools. I was sick a lot. So by the time I was 10 years old, I have asthma. And by the time I was 10 years old, my body was actually addicted to a steroid called prednisone. So at the age of 10 and a half, I went to live, and I was in a children's hospital for 2.5 years of my life. So there I went to school, we got dressed in regular clothes. I would go home once a month, but it was far from, we lived in the city and the hospital was kind of like upstate. It was in Valhalla, New York. And so there I went to school while they had nurses on staff, and they tried to wean me off prednisone because the prednisone, taking so much of it, created my adrenal glands to shut down. And as we know, your body can't function without adrenaline. So while I was there, so I tell everyone I was like 10 and a half and a drug addict, but not by choice. But it took them time to wean me off this drug and for my adrenal glands to start working properly.
Okay. So do you remember much from your neighborhood when you lived in New York?
I remember, well, several of the neighborhoods I lived in. We weren't very well off. We grew up poor. We lived in one place on Walton Avenue that we lived on the 5th floor, and we slept 5 to a bed. The nice giant rats in New York City kind of ran the place, so we would hear them scurrying around. My siblings would make me sleep on the end of the bed, and I would be all scared sleeping, and I could hear them running around. And I can tell you a quick story. It'd be like when me and my brother were walking up the stairs, and we walk into the apartment, and there's this big rat sitting on the kitchen table, and we looked at it, and it's gnawing at the bread, which was Wonder Bread, and it was gnawing, tearing at it, trying to get at it, and me and my brother look at each other, and we look at the rat, and he looks at us, and we look back, and we're like, "That's your bread!" And we took off, and we ran down 5 stories, because we lived on the 5th floor, and we ran down. It was pretty crazy. So, growing up poor, you don't know you're poor.
Yeah.
So, we did a lot of playing outside, like most more kids, and
So you get upset when kids nowadays don't go outside as much?
well, it's a whole different era now. It's really sad, and then again, it's scary out there, and you sometimes it's scary to let your kids go out and play, but kids, there's so much technology nowadays. It's nice when kids can go out and play, though. but we did do our running around and stuff outside.
So how many siblings do you have?
I have, altogether there's 5 of us, so I have 4 siblings. I have, my sister's the oldest, I'm the second oldest, and then I have 3 brothers. And the first 3 are 11 months apart.
Okay. And then can you tell me about my Tío Ruben and how he was brought into the family?
Well, he's the youngest of the 5, and my mom, when she was pregnant with my youngest brother Ruben, she was separated because my dad was physically and abusive, verbally abusive, and so when my mom was pregnant with my youngest brother, she was already they had separated many times. So she was separated at the time. And then she met my stepdad, who fell in love. My stepdad fell in love with my mom while she was pregnant. My youngest brother is my brother by blood. We have the same parents, but he ended up adopting him because my dad just sort of disowned him because my dad had his own issues and he just thought that my mom was running around and all of us were illegitimate children, so. But we all have the same father and mother, though my youngest brother is adopted by my stepfather, who's no longer here either, and he's Irish, which was another big thing because Irish people didn't marry outside their race, outside just being Irish, so
yeah.
He married a Puerto Rican woman with 5 kids.
We'll come back to that because that was later, right? Like
right.
As you guys moved to California?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my next question was like, you talked about like playing outside and stuff like that. So my question was like, how was it your childhood living in New York specifically at that time?
Well, so in the summers are really humid and they're really hot and like people see it on TV and stuff, but people would open up the fire hydrants in the summer and they use like tin cans, they cut out both sides of the, whatever can, if it was beans or whatever, and you bring it downstairs and they shoot the water out. Or we would go to the community pool because we lived in the city. And I think I was 13 before I saw what real carpeting was. Most people had linoleum.
The tiles?
No, they had linoleum, which is like, you roll it out and they cut it out. That's what's within the apartments,
Okay.
Or wood floors, So, because New York, all the buildings are older, so. But those were our summers. Or schools, we went to school. We went to so many different schools, so I can't really specifically. I do remember one school. It was PS 90. Being in the 3rd grade. We lived on the Grand Concourse. We lived actually 3 blocks from the Yankee Stadium. Yeah, so we lived on this big street called the Grand Concourse, and we went to PS 90. And the schools were much harder than they are out here, And the other thing that we would do is we would have snow days, and when we had snow days, we would go out and we would actually. If it was during school, we would take the lunch trays and try to slide down the hills on lunch tray. But we had a couple sleds. We've done sledding and had snowball fights and stuff like that. We had to dress really warm. We have our boots on and step into big old, because you would think it would be snow and then you stick your foot in it and then it would be like all water. So. We had days, and we also did stuff like we would be walking home from school and it'd be pouring rain, and our mom would say, stay near, stay underneath the overpass, the awnings or something, and we would like just be messing around in the rain and getting soaked, and we'd make some silly excuse when we got home because we just loved playing in the water.
Okay, so.
But they did have stickball. My brothers played stickball. So it was just like playing baseball, but you play with a stick and, like it was a Spalding ball. They would play handball up against the walls. And we did double dutch jump rope, and that kind of stuff. But it was always stuff, we had our chalk, we did hopscotch. And, actually some of that stuff was really, really fun.
Okay, so going back to your stepdad, I wanted to ask, when did you guys move to California?
We moved to California. I was turning 13, I believe. But it was after I had came out of the children's hospital.
How long after?
It was just months. Like, so my stepdad was in the, he fixed computers. That's when they had the big IBM computers and stuff. And I guess he had been out to California a couple times on a couple jobs. And him and my mom were living together. And I think my youngest brother was 5. And it was a difficult time for me because I was just coming home to live forever. So I was, because I only came home once in a while. And then the decision was made that we would be moving out to California. So when I came out here, we were at the tail end of junior high and getting ready to start high school. But it was a very big culture shock,
That was actually my next question. So, like, what was the change? How was the change from New York to California? And then, where in California did you guys move to?
When we first moved out here, when we first moved out here, we lived in the, we lived just a very short time, I believe, in the San Gabriel area. And then we had to find a place, but we lived mostly in like Fountain Valley, in Huntington Beach. And, my stepfather was, of course, American, like Irish, and he didn't speak any Spanish. And so we moved in predominantly white neighborhoods, It was just, and it was hard for us because there was a lot of prejudice going around. But we lived in Huntington Beach first, and the first high school that I went to was Edison High School, and that was a really tough time. But what was the question again?
Like the cultures.
Yeah, so California was like, it was crazy for us. Like everybody was wearing like flip flops and shorts and stuff to school. Where we went to school, and even in junior high, we already had deans, and they had a dress code, and you couldn't wear certain things to school, whatever. And it was already very strict in that sense. So when we come out here and they have open schools, like New York is also closed school because of weather. Mm-hmm. So your gyms and everything are indoors. So all your activities are pretty much indoor during the winters. And out here, everybody's like wearing their bathing suits underneath their clothing, and they're wearing shorts. And we were like, oh my God, can you believe it? They're almost half naked going to school, And they have quads in the schools were open. And it was very free, we used to, and they used to say the word bitching all the time. We used to, for us, the word was bad, but bitching meant really cool, and for us, we're like, oh, they just say that word all the time. And then the real big thing also was that we were Puerto Rican, and because we were Latin, they automatically assumed you were Mexican. And the Mexican culture and the Puerto Rican culture and our foods are so completely different. And so because we were teens, so like people say, hey, let's go get a taco, and we had no clue what it was. No clue. And people be like, and then you don't want to say you don't know what it is because you don't want to be embarrassed. But it's really funny. But it's the same thing. If you go to New York, because there are so many people that are Puerto Rican, they just assume you're Puerto Rican. But not everybody that's Latin is Puerto Rican in New York. But there is a lot of Puerto Ricans that live in New York. But it's the same out here. They just assume because you're Latin, you're Mexican. So it was kind of hard, and people would say stuff like, go back to TJ, and we're like, what the heck does that mean? And we had an uncle that lived out here, and he says, oh, that means Tijuana. And we're like, well, why didn't they want to send us to Mexico or Tijuana? We didn't get it. Because, being Puerto Rican, and we were born in New York anyway, so we're already citizens, but if you're Puerto Rican and born in Puerto Rico, you're automatically a citizen of the United States.
Because it's a protectorate.
Yeah, the Commonwealth country to the United States, yeah.
So moving on, when did you get your first car? Because now we're in high school and we're in California.
So, and we went, Sunny Hills, that's where I graduated, but I went to 3 high schools. I started out at Edison, and then I went to Huntington High, which was a little bit more cooler, everybody's like cowabunga, Like they weren't so discriminative. And then we went to Sunny Hills. My last 2 years were at Sunny Hills, which is in Fullerton, where we reside now. And it was predominantly white. There was only two black people in the whole entire school, and maybe 10 Latin, maybe 12.
So predominantly white.
Yes, and now it's predominantly Asian.
Yeah.
But all the kids, you know, a lot of the kids were parents who were well off. So when I was going to school and I was a senior and still riding the bus, kids were getting dropped off in limos or driving their Cadillacs to Bills, you know, and we're like, yeah, we're seniors and still riding the bus. But the last part of my senior year, my mom had a Subaru, and, you know, we learned to drive in high school, which is out of high school now. Yeah, but driver's ed was part of high school requirements too, you know. So
it isn't anymore.
It isn't anymore. So the last time it was when your older sister Sharice was in high school. They were just still teaching the educational part of it, not the driving part of it, but the writing part of it.
So back to you.
Yeah. So I had my license, and I drove my mom's Subaru, and then I got a job when I was a senior, and then I was just right out of high school and graduated when I got my very first car, which was a 280Z, and I bought it used, and I was working at a dealership called Ted Jones Ford. And when I started there, I was going to school I was a senior. I'd go to school during the day, and my hours were 1 to 10 o'clock at night. But my very, very first job was working at Taco Bell.
Okay. Wait, so when you got your car, what year was it?
I got my car probably in between 1980 and 1981, but it was a 78 280Z. With a two-seater car.
Was that like your prized possession at the time?
Well, I had a car. I can get around town, you know, and it was nice having a car, and I had a job. So
yeah. So going back to your high school experience, you talked about Huntington Beach a little bit. They were a little more relaxed, but then you talked about Sunny, and you gave like that look. So what happened at Sunny that you
Hills? At Sunny Hills, the thing is that people could say whatever they wanted. So if there was racial slurs or people would make comments, it was no big deal. Like they wasn't reprimanded about it. Not like now. You have to be very careful.
PC being stuff like.
Yeah, but also for me, like I told you, I was sick a lot with my asthma. So part of my junior year, I was sick and had to do night school. And so I made up a lot of my credits because I had missed a lot of school. I made up a lot of my credits in the night school, which I went to Sunny Hill. Sunny Hill had their own night school right there. So they give you booklets and stuff, and you know, and so I graduated with my class in '79. Woo! But, and I made up a lot of the credits. I had extra credits. I lacked credits in PE because I couldn't take regular PE. The first year I went to high school, I did field hockey. And I was really good at it. So I run around, but every time I would play a game, I would get an asthma attack. So then they put me in adaptive PE. And adaptive PE compared to now was very different, and people make fun of you. So I lacked PE credits, but I did have enough credits, extra credits, because I made it up in other classes.
But like you talked about racial
discrimination. Yeah, because people would say things to us, and because we were Latin, or make comments, and we really couldn't say anything. You either ignore it, or you know. No one got reprimanded for that. And so we did live through the, you know, somewhat racial discrimination in the sense that people would make comments about being Latin, about they would look it down at you, and they would think that they think that every Latin is gonna be, or girls were gonna be pregnant by the time they're 15 or pushing strollers or whatever, and that lasted for a long time because even when I had my first daughter, your older sister Sharice, even when she was young, people just assume, they're of Latin descent, they're just gonna have kids young and run around and have a million of them, which is kind of sad, but you just have to live past that. You have to know that sometimes people are ignorant, and when you judge everybody by the same, that's just like if I would say all white people are prejudiced. That's not true. There's a lot of people that are prejudiced, but they're not all prejudiced, And nowadays, there's so many families that are multicultural. You really can't say too much,
So now we're out of high school. What did you do after high school?
Well, I started working when I was in high school, and then when I graduated high school, I used to work from 1 to 10, then they moved me days. But I moved out of my home when I was 17 and a half. I had some trouble at home, and I moved out, and then I kind of couch surfed for a while. I came back home, but I worked full time, and then I moved back out, and I had roommates for a while, and I also, in my early 20s, I started dating this guy named Roberto, and we called him Bert. And then, we got in. I was always into dancing. Dancing was my thing. I loved to dance, whether it was salsa dancing. I did salsa dancing I started salsa dancing, going to salsa clubs when I was 16, though.
So how'd you get into those clubs?
Because salsa clubs at that time they were like family, like owned, and families can go and you would have dinner, and then the bands would come out later. So if you were with your parents, you can stay. So my mom, we would go to the salsa club with other people, and then the music would start at 9 o'clock, and my sister and I would go with my mom, and then we would salsa dance, and we learned how to salsa dance. And well, we were salsa dancing since we were little, so I shouldn't say that, because growing up in New York, people would have their functions and their parties, their birthday parties and all that stuff, and they would stay up dancing till the very next day and drinking and dancing. And so we learned to dance when we were young. So I shouldn't say we just learned, but we got to experience going out to a nightclub type of avenue. It would always start out as a dinner, and then people would stay afterwards. And because we were with our families, we were able to stay.
And then, so leading into that, you said you started dancing. Right?
So we used to go out dancing, and also, when we were growing up, when we were out here, they had what they call 21 and under clubs.
Yeah, they still have those.
Yeah, but they had several of them. So they had one in Long Beach that we used to go to, and they had one in Orange called Circle City. The one in Long Beach was called Noah's Ark. And then they had one that was called Circus, but I didn't go there too much. But that was our thing. Like, go to work or whatever, or even when we were in high school, we couldn't wait to go to these little dance things. Mm-hmm. And I met two of my best friends as seniors at Sunny Hills, and Deborah Winters and Luz Cepeda, and we stayed friends ever since. Of course there was times where we didn't really talk because everybody goes out in their own way, but we always stayed friends, and till this day we're still really best friends.
So, like I said, back to the dancing, how did you guys start,
we would, if we were driving, we would have a car. When I got my car, and I had my two little ADZ, it was terrible because I would make Deborah drive because she was the tallest, and then, if it was Lucy or whoever, we were going, and we would sit like three of us in the back, and we squished down because it was a two-seater car. And then eventually I got like a Toyota Celica, a four-seater. So then,
Is that the picture that you had showed me? The Toyota, or is that a different one?
no, that's a truck.
Okay.
That was later on. So I had like the 280Z, and then I got a Toyota Celica. And then, but we would always go to the 21 and under clubs. And then at one time, I got a fake ID. And then I was able, because in New York, and then in between all this time, I did travel back to New York.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. And there was a time where I stayed in New York for a while, and I was working in Greenwich, Connecticut. So after I turned 18, I would travel back to New York, and then I would go back and forth. And then there was a period of time that I stayed out there. So I went back and forth.
What caused you to go back and forth?
Because I really missed the East Coast. And the only reason why I really stuck out here was because my immediate family, my mom, and my siblings were here. But I really wanted to live back east. So I would go back to New York, and I started going back to New York when I was 18. 18 was legal age to drink or to go out. So when I would go back to New York, I would stay with some of my cousins or friends. And I had my friend Joe, I think you remember him. So we were already friends. So I would go back to New York, and then we would cut out coupons out of the newspaper to get into the clubs. Were like, even back then, were like maybe $40, $60 to get in. So we would cut out the coupons, and I would tell my mom I wasn't taking the subway, but I really was, because that was the cheapest way to travel. So as soon as I turned 18, I would travel back and forth to New York. And then there was a period of time that I just stayed out there, and I stayed in Port Chester, New York, which is all Italians. But I couldn't tell people I was Italian because they didn't really like...
That you were Puerto Rican.
I'm sorry, you're right. I couldn't tell people I was Puerto Rican because it was an Italian town. They didn't really like Puerto Ricans. So, and then I would go from Port Chester to Greenwich, Connecticut. I would take a cab every day. It cost me $5 to get there and $5 to get back. And I worked at a Cadillac dealer car, Grassy Cadillac. And so I did go back and forth. And so since I was always able to go to the clubs out there at 18, because they hadn't changed the law yet. So when I came out, you know, when I would be back home here, it would be upsetting to me that I couldn't go to a club because they were 21 and over here. So at that time, I had a birth certificate from a friend in New York, and I came out here. And I shouldn't be telling this on camera, but I went to the DMV and I used this birth certificate and got an ID, and then I would still go to 21 and under clubs with certain people, and then other people who were able to go out, 21 and over.
Did you and your friend look alike, or?
No. I had a birth certificate, and I went into the DMV and said, oh, I just moved out here from New York, and I can't believe I can't go anywhere. Oh my God. And like, everything's like 21 and over, you know, so. Yeah, and I always looked really young for my age. When I went into the DMV, I was really nervous, really scared, and I thought I was going to go down. And they said, this lady goes, this girl does, I was just trying to get an ID. So they said, this girl doesn't look no 20, 21. I think the ID made me a little older, and I was only 18. And the lady says, well, you can't do anything. She has a birth certificate from New York. You know, I don't want to go to jail. So it's too many years now. But anyway, I got an ID that had all her information, but it had my picture on it.
Wait,
Yeah.
so.
Because I pretended I was someone else.
But, because on her birth certificate it wouldn't have height or anything, huh?
No, it just has your name, when
Yeah.
you're born, and I came out here and said, hey, I came out here, I need to get an ID, a photo ID, because I can't go anywhere, which you really need a photo ID anywhere you go. So I don't know how they do it now, but back then you can go in there with a birth certificate, you know. So I did that for, you know, I had that ID, was good for a few years, and then I eventually turned 21. But the funniest part of the story is that when I turned 21, they make more of a havoc, like with my real ID, they'd be like, is that really you? And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's my real ID. And the other one was my picture on it, but it just wasn't my real information. So like I had to memorize, you know, Teresa Lavallo, and I had to memorize her birthday and all this stuff. But it was the height and weight and all that stuff was easy because that was, you know, but so I was always into the dancing, but it was always about dancing. And when I would go back to New York, I'd go to the disco clubs and stuff like that. And then when, like I said, in my early 20s, and I met Bert, and then he took me down to Soul Train, and I got into dancing on the train, and you know, but dancing was always my thing.
So let me ask you, like birth of like stuff like disco, hip hop. That time, what was it like? The parties, the clubs.
Oh my gosh! Well, out here, I know a lot of people know who he is. Ice-T, who is on a regular TV show. He was actually a DJ, and they had these underground parties, and we would go to these old buildings in LA, and everybody had their little their little breaking suits and doing this thing. And I mean, I showed you some pictures. I have my picture book where we'd go down to even Laguna, and Bert would hook up his whole stereo thing, and he'd DJ, scratch, and he had his little piece of cardboard where he did all his spinning and everything, and everybody had a cardboard. Or we go to Venice Beach, and it was a great time. It was a fun time. Everybody was pop locking. A lot of the breaking movies that you see, I have friends in those movies. I have friends in videos, in some of the Michael Jackson videos. We have friends. And I know quite a few of the guys from the original LA Lockers, and they used to dance on Soul Train. I know quite a few of them. All those guys are well in their 60s or older. They started in the 70s, but it was a great time. It was a fun time, and the one thing about breakdancing and stuff, like, it was a time when when they had gangs and stuff. Like, now people battled on the dance floor, and people they get their groups together, and everybody did their stuff, or they had a little routine, and then they break out in there. Whoever had the best spins. When they do the windmills and all this stuff. So it was really a fun time, a great time. We spent a lot of time, like almost every day of the week. Even when I went to work, I'd come home and we change and we'd go. There was always a dance contest going on somewhere, and everybody's trying to make some money, and we go to all these different dance contests, and everybody would just kind of do a routine or do their whatever they did best, and it was just a really great time. And I remember when they thought that hip hop and all that stuff was just a fad, it was gonna, and it's really, really, it's amazing to see that hip hop just grow and just take different forms of hip hop, even in dance. Like even when watching your own sisters dance, and they got into more technical dancing, where I was more of what they call street dancer. So it's amazing to see the different styles of hip hop and dances, and they've taken it and they've been so much more creative in the different types of music. I never was really into all the cussing kind of music, rap and stuff like that, but hip hop was and when breakdancing was out, it was just a really fun time, and it was always fun to watch the different styles of dance, and I really loved it when people would do the windmills and they could do the head spin and go across, and to see all that stuff come back, it's just like really amazing.
So, talking about all the parties, the underground parties, talk about your party planning, party people.
Yeah, so there came a time we were like, hey, we should, and it's really funny because it was me and Bert, who was my boyfriend at the time, and his ex-girlfriend, and her boyfriend, and we all became a little crew. And then we started making our own flyers, we would handwrite them, and then we used to rent this place right here in Fullerton. It was like at a bowling alley, but they had like this big area, and we charged $5 to get in. We'd have a dance contest, and it was, you know, people always had like these little party crews, and everybody would have parties. So we thought, hey, we can do this. And most of the time, you'd have the bar would, you know, keep their money because that's how they made their money. And we just rent a spot, and then we paid for the rental of the place, and everything else was our money to split up or whatever. But that was a really fun time, you know, to also having our own parties, and we would go to other people's parties, but, you know, our parties got a little, you know, like people would come. We had a lot of people come. It was really a fun time.
Do you have any like crazy stories about the parties that you guys threw?
You know, like the typical stuff was maybe like people getting a little bit out of hand or a little bit too drunk. But, you know, I have to say that our parties were a lot calmer compared to other parties, because I know that other places it would get a little too crazy.
Was Mary Jane invited?
Who?
Mary Jane?
Mary Jane. As in the...
Yeah.
This one. Oh, well, I'm sure there was people that did, but that wasn't my thing. I would have a few drinks here and there, and, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on, but Mary Jane was, I think it's been something that's been around for a long time.
Well, no, that's legal now. So.
Yeah, but yeah, of course, I know people that were into that, and, you know, I met a lot of famous people in my time when I was doing Soul Train and stuff. It was very cool. Going to the shows, and you'd meet these people, these performers, like up and close and personal, and that's probably the best thing.
Well, like before we get into Soul Train, like any people that you invited to your parties that got maybe big or like big in that time.
There was dancers that would come to our parties that did a lot of videos, a lot of dance videos with Michael Jackson or what's her name? I can't remember her name. There was some that did stuff with Madonna. And then I can't remember the other gal's name. She had like a little scratchy voice. But I can't remember her name.
Do you remember this at all, cameraman?
No.
She makes commercials now for like the skin rash stuff.
Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, Cyndi Lauper. There was a lot of them that did work with her. Just like your siblings have friends that are dancing now with
Katy Perry
and Beyonce and Jennifer Lopez, and
Beyonce.
Yeah, they have a lot of friends that dance with a lot of these amazing people. So it's kind of cool to see it all, like, you know. But now, like, to see our culture is like
intertwined.
Yeah, and then like the styles that we wore coming back, I'm like, oh my God, I got that in my closet from about 30 years ago.
Thank you, by the way. So now we're getting into Soul Train. So when, like, I have so many questions. So when did you like first show up? How did you guys hear about it?
Oh no, well, when I met Bert, they considered him a regular. So a regular means that when you go, they tape the show once a month. They tape 4 shows in one weekend. So one weekend he just asked me to go up there with him, and I was like, no, they're not gonna let me in. So they go, okay, all regulars come in. And so they all went in, he went in, and we were dressed alike. He just thought it was cool we dressed alike. They put us on stage together, but anyway, so I'm standing out there, and they said, hey, you, come on, you know, and I was like, oh, cool. So I got in there, and he was all excited. So that was the first time, and by the second time that I went, I'm standing out there, and they say, okay, all regulars come in, and then they all go in, and the guy, he says, you too? And I was like, oh, he goes, you're a regular? And I was like, I guess. So that by the second time I went, I was a regular, and they would put me up on stages. And then I've done the Soul Train line a couple of times. I actually would hide because I didn't want to come down the Soul Train line by myself. I did it a few times, and you get really like anxious and anxiety. But But I've been up on stage. But you know what's really crazy is that they have people that dance on the floors. They call them floor regulars, and then they have the stage people and the different stages in the back and everything. And then when they put me on the risers, like the very first time, and then the second time I came, they put me on the risers. You know, I got like dirty looks from the people on the floor. They're like, the people on the floor want to be moved up to the risers, you know. But it was a really great experience, and I never realized and later on that a lot of people went to Soul Train as a stepping stone, because a lot of these people either want to be actresses or singers, and that was Soul Train now is considered like one of the
So we're back from our break, and I want you to continue from where you left off, talking about Soul Train.
So Soul Train now is a big part of Black history, because Soul Train, all the Black groups, or a lot of the that when you went on Soul Train, that it's kind of like you've made it. So Soul Train was a stepping stone, not just for a lot of the bands and big groups out there, but I didn't realize that a lot of the people that were on Soul Train that were dancers were people who wanted to get into the acting business or the singing business. But I was always all about dance. So my thing was, I always had a great time when I went to Soul Train, and even because I just enjoyed the dancing, and it was cool to be on a show. I mean, I did bandstand like one time, but Soul Train, I went there with Bird, because he was who I was seeing, and he's the one that introduced me to it. And then I introduced my girlfriend Deborah to it, and I had some other friends. My brother was on it, my brother-in-law was on it. But it was just great to see a lot of groups. Like, you're right there. It's like going to a concert. But we did spend like the entire weekend there. And we would change the clothing. But because the way it was edited, sometimes it looked like you wore the same thing all 4 weeks, or it looked like you changed 4 times in one show.
Yeah.
But it was a great time. And then it was after the fact that I realized, oh my gosh, a lot of the people that were on this show, not just the groups and stuff, but like the individuals that were on there were people that were trying to make it into either singing or the entertainment business. And just like Rosie Perez, who I met on the show, and she became famous in the sense that she did some movies and stuff, and a lot of people thought that if I would have stayed on the show, it would have been the same for me. But it's a scary business, in the entertainment business and stuff. And back in those days, sometimes people wanted to do certain favors and stuff, and I wasn't into that. But it was definitely a great time, great fun when I was on the show.
Would you maybe wanted to do more if you could have?
Yeah, and I would have loved. Actually, there was a girl on the show, and she was helping people. Like, she wanted to start her own business, her own agency. Okay. And she had actually got me a role on Young and the Restless, or to go try out, for the role. And but at the time I found out I was pregnant. This was in 1986 or 1980, the early part of 1987.
And that was.
And when I found out I was pregnant, and that's just when with the oldest sister, Cherise. And so I did the show a few more times, and then I left the show, and then I didn't go to try out for the part. So, and I got sick a lot. I was sick when I was pregnant with Cherise, your older sister, but she was born in November of 1987. And so people said, oh, go back to the show, but I never really did. But even when I was pregnant, I continued to dance. And I would go out. I wasn't...
Were you not very big while you were pregnant?
Well, at the beginning I wasn't, but I felt very big towards the end. But I would still go dancing, and I always had fun. And I know when I was bigger, by the time I was 8 months, I was pretty big, and I would know people were looking at me going, why is that pregnant woman out here and dance? And that's when they used to do the Cabbage Patch. So we used to do the Cabbage Patch and Running Man. And so I was still out dancing, you know, when I was pregnant with Cherise. I never knew with any of you guys what I was having, except for you. But with your sisters, I never wanted to know. And then when I had you, because I was older when I had you, and I had to have an amniocentesis because they want to make sure that everything was okay because I was older. So I'm sure everybody can do the math. If you're 17 and I had you when I was 40, that makes me 57. So yeah, anyway.
But going back a little bit, how long did you and Bert date for?
We dated for, gosh, I would say a good 3 years.
Okay, how'd you guys meet?
So, I used to do these hot leg contests. So, you know, back then, everybody would, you know, either had their minis or whatever, but I would get into these contests, and I used to do a lot of dancing. So not that I was bragging, but, you know, everybody would say, oh man, you have really great legs. So I would get into these contests, these hot leg contests, and I just happened to be at this place that it was called Reflections, which is where the outlets, the orange outlets are.
Okay.
But we used to call it Rejections because there was always like some geeky guys there. But anyway, so I would go and I met Bert was in a at that time they were doing I don't know if it was Hot Guys or like, but he was in like a white suit and he was all GQ, like a GQ contest for guys or whatever, and he was on a contest and I was in a hot legs contest, and we met that way, and then we just started talking and we would hang out, you know, and then we just started hanging out, and at the time he had a little girl and I had no kids. I'm in my early 20s. So he's the one that took me to Soul Train, and that's how I got into Soul Train. I did Soul Train for a few years, and but I didn't go every month, but I did go steadily. But it was a great time, and he did a lot of dancing too. So I did we did routines together, and then went to contests together.
Competed?
And we competed in a couple contests, and he would take me. A few times we went to hot leg contests, and he would say, oh, you gotta get in this one. And one time he took me to one the club was mostly all black, and I was super tan, and we are somewhat part black because we're Puerto Rican, but it was like really, anyway, I ended up winning the contest. I won like a trip and, you know, like champagne and all this stuff. And then I went to the bathroom and these girls were talking like smack and like, I can't believe she won the contest. And it was kind of crazy. He had to get me out of the club. It was that was a crazy story. And I was like, you gotta get me out here, you're gonna kick my butt because I wasn't black enough or something, you know. But, you know, people don't realize that Puerto Ricans have a percentage of black in us besides Spanish and Indian and European and all kinds. So we're like Creole people. We have every nationality in us.
Okay. And then jumping back to the future, so let's say you've had Cherise for a couple of years now. When did you meet Rocky and Serena's father? Okay,
well, yeah, so I had Cherise, and that was a weird story because her dad had always told me that he had an accident when he was young and he supposedly couldn't have kids or whatever. But, you know, I got pregnant, and we were together like for a couple years before I got pregnant. But, you know, we never married or anything like that. But then I have a girlfriend who was dating somebody at Camp Pendleton, and he was a Marine. And so I was like, I really didn't like anybody in the service or Marines or anything, because my sister used to date a guy in the Marine, and he had, you know, we always said that Marines had a girlfriend at every port or whatever, you know, like, or
Yeah.
men in the military, I should say. So, and her name was Norma, and she was just like, was dating this guy, and she really wanted to go, and Camp Pendleton is like an hour away. So I was like, I don't want to drive home. Come on, go to the E Club, and the E Club is where all the, it's like a club, and women go there, and you have to go through the gate, and they check your insurance and your ID, and then they let you go to the E Club, and there was a club. So I went with her because she wanted to meet this guy that she was seeing, and blah blah blah. So I went to the E Club, and of course I met Luigi, which his name is Gilberto, and that was his nickname. And then he was younger than I was, but we danced and we talked, and then we had to go, and I was trying to get out of there, and you know, he asked me for my number, and at the time I was working for a Toyota dealer in Downey, and the number was 1-800-TOYS. So I said, well, if you can remember this number, 1-800, and it was 1-800-222-TOYS. That was the phone number. So remember, like a couple days later, he called me up. So, you know, we started writing letters because he was always deployed and all this stuff. So we met, and then actually I was pregnant with Raquel before we got married, but I was like a couple months pregnant, and we got married in Reno with the intentions to have another wedding at some time. And then, you know, Serena and Raquel only 19 months apart, but unfortunately, you know, when he got out of service and went to work for the railroad, he was in a train derailment, and we lost him, and so on and so on. And then later on I met your dad, and we got married, and we had you, which is amazing. So now I have 3 girls and a boy, and you know, your father and I are not together, but we have you, and that's amazing.
And so now caught up to now, like...
And now I still love to dance. And now I have my honey that I dance with all the time now, well, when we get a chance.
I feel like this was a great experience to learn stuff that I didn't know before and ask you questions that I wanted to ask, and I thank you for allowing me to interview you.
And thank you for wanting to interview you, and you know that I love you, you're my baby. Mwah. And was there any other questions that you needed to ask me or you wanted to know before we zoom along?
I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.